Good morning. Did I turn my mic on? Now I don't remember. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, you can hear me. Thanks. All right. I appreciate that. I am starting this morning on the slides with a slide that typically is at the end of the sermon. And I don't always, at the end of the sermon, mention what that's for. And so I wanted to take a moment because I added something to it, but I wanted to let you know what that's for. So a lot of times whenever people come to service, they're used to having some sort of invitation, and that's great, that's wonderful. Here our tradition is the invitation always stands. You don't have to wait till a specific time in the sermon. You can respond at any time, and we would love to have pray over you. We would love to have that. What I mean by that is you can respond through means of finding an individual and finding someone to talk to. That is available at any time throughout the week. But in that moment, there is an opportunity to either come forward, to let some prayer requests known, come to one of the elders and ministers that surround the auditorium, but also you can scan this QR code and it will take you to a digital response form where you can ask for prayers there, you can ask for further study. So sometimes you may just not be comfortable being able to come forward for whatever reason, and so that is a way of having that available. We added something last week to that card, and I had to think through it and figure it out a little bit, and I still feel slightly awkward with this, but what it is it's a response that if you have something that you would like the ministers to deal with in their weekly podcast, that is a way of saying, hey, Mitch said this in a sermon, can you go deeper? Can you dive a little bit further into that? Or there's something going on, can y'all address this? I'm not saying we will address everything, but at the bottom of that form, there is a place to submit some questions. And if you didn't know that the ministers have started a podcast, then that's your announcement that we did. We're 3 episodes in. You can find it most places that you listen to podcasts, or if you want to watch it, it's on YouTube. And really, it's just us guys having a good time being able to dive further and talk together about some more depth of what goes on behind putting together sermons and also helping lead in our contexts. So that's a little bit about that I wanted you to know or at least be aware of, and we welcome your questions. That's the whole point. We welcome your response. We welcome your questions. We want this to be a conversation, not just a monologue. Now, with that in mind, there's been a lot of question about, that is not the song that I should be having. Can you go back to my second slide? We should be in the sermon now. Thank you. That'll look great. So we have a lot of question about what's going on. Like a lot of people like a sermon series in Leviticus. You know, I'm not so sure about this. And I've had some wonderful conversations with people through this. And so that's the reason I bring that up. But I want to start this morning with a question that is going to catalyst us into Leviticus. And it's a question that sounds a little weird. Here's the question. How often should a person bathe? How often, just think about that for a moment. How often should someone bathe? Take a shower, bathe? Part of that depends upon context, doesn't it? But for most of us, our immediate answer, we're not going to have to think twice about this. Well, daily, right? I mean, sometimes if it's hot outside, if you're working outside and it's hot, you need 2 showers a day. Some people may need more. But I'm not pointing any fingers, just saying that might be the case. That we kind of look at that and go, well, of course this would be the case. Do you realize how weird we are? Not just in our time, but even in our world. That this was a reality that whenever I spent months in Europe, I realized not everyone bathes every day. And that was weird for me. It wasn't weird for them. Were they dirty? Well, that depends upon context. Some parts of the world, and even some times in history, bathing was at best once a week. Sometimes it was longer than that. Sometimes it was more seasonal. Sometimes it was only partial, your hands, your feet, your face. And we may, for lack of better terms, hold our nose up to a situation like that And we may think that's just weird, but what mattered wasn't how often you bathed. What mattered was, are you considered clean? Are you considered clean in the community that you belong to? See, cleanliness isn't just about soap and water. Cleanliness is about belonging. It's about how you belong in the community you're with. And that's the world of Leviticus. You see, to be unclean doesn't simply mean that you're dirty, that you need to go take a bath. To be unclean meant something in your body, some condition that you had, or something in your life had put you out of step with the life of the community. Uncleanliness didn't mean you need to take a bath. It meant you need to get right with the community. You need to get back in step. You weren't expelled because you stank. You were set apart because you weren't clean. Because life or health or holiness is at stake here. So when we open Leviticus 13 and 14, which if you want to go ahead and open your Bibles, that's where we're going to be, Leviticus 13. We'll be reading a section there in just a second. When we open Leviticus 13 and 14, our modern instincts are to read these chapters and so many other chapters in Leviticus as some sort of medical textbook. And when we read it as a medical textbook, we kind of are able to poke holes in it saying, well, we know science has proved that we don't have to do this anymore. Science has proved that, but it's not a medical textbook. Nor is it a hygiene manual. It's just about hygiene. When we read it with those kind of glasses, we're going to get the wrong point. See, Leviticus isn't asking the question, how often should someone bathe? Or what necessitates them to go take a shower? It's not asking that question. The question that Leviticus is asking over and over again is, who can dwell in the presence of a holy God? Who is it that can dwell in the presence of a holy God? And now we're adding to the question, not just who can do that, but when something happens in your life that makes you unclean, whether brought on by someone else or a choice that you have made, when something happens, how do you get back? How do you get back in relationship? How do you get back in harmony with God? So Leviticus 13 names what disrupts wholeness. And then 14, God shows the way to get back in relationship. Because in God's economy, being declared unclean is never the end of the story. The goal is always return, restoration, re-entry into the life of the people in the presence of God. So Leviticus 13, we'll read a section of this. This is from the New Living Translation. It says this: "The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, if anyone has a swelling or a rash or discolored skin that might develop into a serious skin disease, that person must be brought to Aaron the priest or to one of his sons. The priest will examine the infected area of skin. If the hair is the hair in that affected area has turned white, and the problem appears to be more than skin deep, it is a serious skin disease. And the priest who examines it must pronounce the person ceremonially unclean." Now, I felt all of a sudden some of you start looking at the white hair of your neighbor. That is not what it's talking about, okay? Just to be clear, white hair is not ceremonially unclean. Verse 4, "But if the affected area of the skin is only a white discoloration and does not appear to be more than skin deep, and if the hair on the spot has not turned white, the priest will quarantine the person for 7 days. On the seventh day, the priest will make another examination. If he finds the affected area has not changed and the problem has not spread on the skin, the priest will quarantine the person for 7 more days. On the seventh day, the priest will make another examination. If he finds the affected area has faded and has not spread, the priest will pronounce the person ceremonially clean. It was only a rash. The person's clothing must be washed, and the person will be ceremonially clean. But if the rash continues to spread after the person has been examined by the priest and has been pronounced clean, the infected person must return to be examined again. If the priest finds that the rash has spread, he must pronounce the person unclean, for it is indeed a skin disease." How many of you have heard a sermon on Leviticus 13? I haven't preached a sermon on Leviticus 13. I think there's reason to be involved, right? Is that when just reading that text, you're like, come to church with me. This Sunday, the preacher's talking about skin diseases. Yeah, that doesn't sound too welcoming. It doesn't sound like something that's that exciting, but let me tell you, there's something going on here that I think we need to talk about. See, a common theme in Leviticus chapters 11 through 15 is what is clean and what is unclean. And in fact, when this theme will be picked up in chapters 17 through 20, but now the question isn't simply about clean and unclean, it is actually talking about purity, that there's something more than skin deep that is happening that also needs to be addressed, something that can make you unclean in the eyes of the Lord. See, these cleanliness laws are not just about sanitation, although that's part of it. They're also about separation, to make them different than the nations of the world around them, and they're also about sanctification, to draw near to God. So they are about sanitation, but also separation and sanctification. Now, if you're reading along in your own Bible, you may have noticed that instead of the word skin disease, it may have used the word leprosy. Leprosy has all sorts of connotations in our mind, but often what happens is we head down to one idea that we know. We know what leprosy is now. We know that there are leprous camps still having to deal with this particular skin disease, but the Hebrew term here is actually far broader in understanding than just leprosy, and even far broader in term than just skin disease. It also refers to mildew or any kind of fungus or just general decay. The issue is not simply illness, it's the presence of something that spreads, that corrupts, and threatens wholeness. And if it threatens wholeness, it threatens holiness. So how do you know? How do you know whenever there's something that threatening to the cleanliness and holiness of the community? Well, notice the job of the priest here. It's pretty passive. You examine. The priest's whole role here is diagnostic. He watches, he waits, he examines. He distinguishes between what is clean and unclean. He watches, he waits, and he examines. You know, a lot of times whenever we read the job of the priest, we can sometimes glorify it to all these things that they got to do. But then whenever you read the job of this priest, you're like, yeah, but there's some things that they had to do. But this one had to have been hard. Because most any guy knows this, and I'm sure there's plenty of women that understand this as well, but like whenever a problem presents itself to a guy, what do we want to do? We want to fix it. We want to address the problem. We want to fix it. And now the command from the Lord, whenever something is unclean, or what it is we don't know if it's clean or unclean, the command from the Lord is examine, wait, and then examine again and wait. That's really hard, isn't it? This is teaching Israel and us that not everything that looks dangerous is. Someone can come with something they're like, yeah, I'm not so sure about this, and that's just perfectly fine. It's just a hair growing white. Not a problem. But also, not everything that looks harmless should be ignored. Well, it's just a hair. It's not a problem. Let's check it out. See, holiness requires discernment. Requires us to discern what is clean, what is unclean, what is right, what is wrong. So God's people are taught to pay attention. Pay attention to what's going on. Scripture repeatedly uses disease as a metaphor for sin, something that we should pay attention to. Whenever you get sick, you pay attention to it. Your body is screaming for you to pay attention to it. You may not know exactly what it is that is making you sick, but you don't feel right, you don't feel good, and you need to pay attention to it. If you ignore it, it can get worse. You need to pay attention. And the Bible uses that kind of idea to say, hey, you know what is like that? Sin. You need to pay attention to it, not to shame. We're not comparing sin to a sickness just to shame people. We're comparing it to something of how sin works. Isaiah, Jeremiah, they both describe sin as wounds, as sicknesses, and as decay. It's not just cosmetic, but it's systemic. Sin isn't a surface problem. It goes deep and it spreads. Simply managing the outward behavior is not enough. Notice that the priest doesn't tell the person that comes to him saying, hey, I got this spot, you need to look at it. He doesn't just simply say, hey, go wash. Go wash. It just means that you're dirty. Go wash it. He says, okay, I'm going to look at that in a week. We're going to see what happens. It's not just a simple fix of an external. We need to see how deep is the problem. What is going on here? Removing the visible symptoms without addressing the root leaves the disease intact. We know that now. Science has taught us that. Our health has taught us that. Jesus points to that reality in Matthew 15. He says, sin does not originate in the hands, it originates in the heart. That's where it starts. True cleansing must begin on the inside, and if it's not dealt with, it will spread. Check out how James says it. Temptation comes from our own desires, which entice us and drag us away. These desires give birth to sinful actions, and when sin is allowed to grow, it gives birth to death. So sin, like leprosy and so many other things, will grow if left unaddressed. And when it grows, it isolates us from the community. Sin, like sickness, isolates us from the community. We know that. What do you do whenever you're sick? You isolate yourself. You stay away from others because you don't want them sick as well. And often that's because you love them. If you didn't like them, you would just go breathe up all in their space all the time and say, I don't care if you get sick. But if you really like them, you stay away. You isolate yourself. And it's really hard to do that, isn't it? It's really hard to be isolated from community. Not only does sickness do that, sin will do that as well. And this is where the purity code of Leviticus 17 through 20 really comes in, is that it's really easy to see how a skin disease needs to be isolated from community. It's really hard to see how a desire within us, a sin within us, should also isolate us from the community. But that's where purity starts to speak. Turn to Leviticus 18. If you're still there, we're close. Leviticus 18. This is part of the purity code, an extension of the cleanliness code. So it says this in verse 1. Then the Lord said to Moses, give the following instructions to the people of Israel. I am the Lord your God, so do not act like the people in Egypt, where you used to live, or like the people of Canaan, where I'm taking you. You must not imitate their way of life. You must obey all of my regulations and be careful to obey my decrees, for I am the Lord your God. If you obey my decrees and my regulations, you will find life through them. I am the Lord. Here God gives the reasons and rationale behind the purity laws. It's not just a difference for difference sake. It's to be holy because God has called us to holiness. It's not just we're going to be different, we're going to be weird just for that. It's not like we're down in Austin, keep Austin weird. It's not just for the sake of being weird. It's for the sake of being different because God is different. Holy because God is holy. Now, I'm going to give you a chance to just skim the rest of chapter 18 for a second. You can get the theme of chapter 18. Just start skimming chapter 18. Do you see where Moses talks about first? The rest, verse after verse, is about sexual purity. Verse after verse commands who you can't have sexual relationships with. I can sum it up really easy. Here's the sum up. You should not have sex with someone that you're not married to. That's it. It's a very easy way to understand the sexual ethic of Scripture, is that you should not have sexual relations with someone you're not married to. And in fact, this includes, there's a verse in there, includes a homosexual relationship. Even if in the eyes of the law you're married, from God's perspective, that's not the sexual ethic. From God's perspective, that is not how it works. And this is important not simply because God is demanding, putting a thumb over us. It's important because this is what holiness does. Is holiness says, we may ask, what's the point in this? Like, why would I need to be pure? Why would I need to have anything of purity? And it's because cleanliness is something we can understand. Purity is what we need to be heading toward. Because of our understanding of cleanliness, we need to be pure because we understand there's something that is deeper going on. And so chapter 18 deals heavily with this sexual ethic. It's not simply considered a defilement, although that's true, but the defilement is both to God and the community. See, the point of these two sections of Leviticus, the cleanliness code and the purity code, it's making this point over and over again. Sin or any kind of defilement isn't just a personal matter. It affects the whole community because sin spreads. Chapter 19, if you want to skim that, it goes to that even further of how it affects the whole community. And see, the thing is, whenever we look at it, when we look at the cleanliness code, we look at the purity code, we can look at that and become very legalistic about it. That, yeah, we can point out and say, that's what the Bible is. It's a legal code of things not to do, and when you don't do these things, you're holy. But remember, the whole point that I'm trying to help us understand is that holiness isn't about checking these boxes. Holiness is responding to the invitation of a holy God. Holiness is about relationship. And we've seen holiness as a relationship to God. Now we're starting to see holiness in relationship to one another. And so what happens when we find ourselves unclean? What happens when we find ourselves unholy? How do we get back? See, that's the cool part about Scripture is sin does not have the final word. There is a way to be redeemed. There's a way to be cleansed. There's a way to be purified. And to illustrate that, I skipped over a section in Leviticus that is actually my favorite section of Leviticus. Head to Leviticus 14. We're going to read this. I didn't know I would love this section until I dove in further. I love this section. Verse 14, and the Lord said to Moses, the following instructions are for those, this is verse 1 of chapter 14. The following instructions are for those seeking ceremonial purification from a skin disease. Those who have been healed must be brought to the priest, who will examine them at a place outside the camp. If the priest finds someone has been healed of a serious skin disease, he will perform a purification ceremony using 2 live birds that are ceremonially clean, a stick of cedar, some scarlet yarn, and a hyssop branch. The priest will order that one bird be slaughtered over a clay pot filled with fresh water. He will take the live bird, the cedar stick, the scarlet yarn, and the hyssop branch and dip them into the blood of the bird that was slaughtered over the fresh water. The priest will sprinkle the blood of the dead bird 7 times on the person being purified of the skin disease. When the priest had purified the person, he will release the live bird in the open field to fly away. All right, here the ceremony is given by God is very unforgettable, right? Like, again, it's quite weird. We have part of the ceremony is for the person that is trying to be clean, he's having blood flung on him. That goes against everything that we think about whenever we think about cleanliness. Is that, oh, hold on, you're supposed to wash that stuff off. But there's something deeper going on here. There's a lesson in that, no doubt, and we're going to get to a little bit of that. But I want us to focus on the birds. 2 birds. One dies, one goes free. The blood of the first bird is killed over a clay pot that has fresh water. Some of your translations may say living water. I think that's important, that it's not just stale water. It's not just any water. Blood is mixed with living water. I mean, as a Christian, the connections to baptism should not be lost upon us. Where blood and water mix for our redemption, for our salvation, that's part of what's going on here. This is why it's one of my favorite chapters of Leviticus. It's just beautiful what's going on. But then the second bird is dunked into this water-blood mix and then set free. One life is given so that another can be set free. This is the gospel hiding in the book of Leviticus, right? I mean, you see the correlation. Centuries later, Jesus would suffer outside the camp. Remember, this ceremony happened outside the camp. Jesus would suffer outside of the camp. He would take our uncleanliness on himself, not because he was defiled, but because we were. And he would die. Just like the first bird, his blood would be poured out, and he died so that we could be declared clean. But Jesus doesn't just cleanse us, he restores us. He brings us back in. And that's used in the language of being set free. See, we're not bound by the sin anymore. We're not bound by the uncleanliness. We are now set free to be back in community. The second bird gets to fly again. No longer bound by the sickness, no longer marked by the isolation, no longer confined outside the camp, gets to fly. That bird is not just forgiven, that bird is free. And that's what Jesus does for us. He doesn't just remove guilt, he restores belonging. He doesn't just cleanse the outside, he purifies the heart. He doesn't just save us from sin, he sets us free to live. I want you to imagine what is going through the mind of that second bird. He just watched his buddy killed, thrown into a water pot. And then whenever he's grabbed, he thinks, that's probably my turn. I deserve it. He gets dunked. And then through mercy, gets set free. You are that second bird. That's who you are. Is that Christ has done this for you. And the reason that's so impactful is because you know that you've been unclean. You know that you are not pure. But through the blood of Christ, you can be. So if Christ has cleansed you, stop living like you're unclean. If he's restored you, don't return to what defiles. If he has set you free, then live like someone who's been released. You can be cleansed. You can be restored. You can walk in holiness. That's what Leviticus is teaching us. That's what Christ continues to teach us. And so this morning, if you want to live free, if you want to be like that free bird, I'm sorry, that's not our invitation song, but if you want to be like that free bird, then you can. You're invited to the water. To come in contact with the blood of Christ, you are invited to the water so that you can live free as well. And if you need help understanding that, or if you just need prayers, whatever it may be that you need, would you let it be known as we stand and sing together?